morning sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the white runner that lined the center aisle of St. Augustine's Church. It was June 7th, a perfect Saturday for a wedding. Outside, the cherry trees were, in full bloom, their pink petals occasionally drifting down onto the shoulders of arriving guests. Lily Chen stood in the small side room of the church, surrounded by her three closest friends who fussed with her veil and the train of her dress. The ivory satin gown had cost more than she'd ever spent on anything, but today was supposed to be worth every penny. She stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself beneath the makeup and elaborate updo. "You look beautiful," her mother said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Your father would have been so proud." Lily nodded and tried to smile. Her father had passed away 2 years ago, before he could meet Tom. A sharp pang of grief mixed with something else, something she couldn't quite name, shot through her chest. 15 minutes, ladies," called the wedding planner from the doorway, clipboard in hand. For a moment, Lily felt like she couldn't breathe. She'd spent the last year and a half planning this day, picking out flowers and table settings, addressing invitations, and arguing with Tom about the guest list. At 32, she'd begun to think her chance at love had passed her by, especially after a string of disappointing relationships. Then Tom had walked into her bookstore on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, looking for a rare first edition as a gift for his mother. There was an immediate spark between them that quickly grew into a flame. 6 months later, he proposed on the rooftop of the city's most expensive restaurant. "I need a minute alone," Lily suddenly announced, her voice sounding strange even to her own ears. Her friends exchanged glances but filed out of the room along with her mother, leaving Lily to take deep breaths in the sudden quiet. Meanwhile, Father David Rodriguez, who had been the parish priest at St. Augustine's for 23 years, straightened his vestments in his office. At 65, he had performed hundreds of weddings, from lavish affairs to simple ceremonies, with just the couple and 2 witnesses. He prided himself on his ability to sense when a couple was truly ready for marriage. Some had a glow about them, a certainty in their movements. Others showed signs of hesitation that often led to difficult conversations during premarital counseling. He had met with Lily and Tom 3 times before today. They seemed well matched on paper, both educated professionals, similar backgrounds, shared interests. Tom was charming and confident, always ready with a joke or compliment. Lily was quieter but had struck Father David as thoughtful and kind. There had been nothing to suggest any problems, yet something had nagged at him during their last meeting. A certain guardedness in Lily's responses, perhaps, or the way she sometimes looked to Tom before answering questions. Father David walked down the hallway toward the main sanctuary, pausing to check in on the groom and his groomsmen, who were adjusting their ties and joking nervously in a small anteroom. "All set, gentlemen?" Father David asked. "Ready as I'll ever be," Tom replied with his trademark grin, his hair perfectly styled and his designer suit impeccably tailored. "Can't wait to see my bride." Father David nodded and continued his rounds, eventually making his way to where the bride was preparing. He knocked gently on the door, expecting to find a room full of excited women. Instead, he found Lily alone, standing by the window, her back to the door. "Everything all right, Lily?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. She turned, startled, and Father David was struck by the expression on her face. Her eyes were dry but filled with a troubled light that didn't match the occasion. This wasn't the look of a happy bride with simple wedding day jitters. "Just gathering my thoughts, Father," she said, her voice steady but thin. Father David had counseled enough troubled souls to recognize when someone was hiding something. "It's normal to be nervous," he said, stepping into the room. "But sometimes nerves are trying to tell us something important." Lily's hands fidgeted with her bouquet of white roses and baby's breath. "Everyone's waiting," she said, avoiding his eyes. "My mom's been dreaming of this day since I was little. Tom's family came all the way from California. We have 200 guests out there, and none of that matters if something isn't right," Father David replied, his voice firm but kind. "What's troubling you, Lily?" For a moment it seemed she might brush off his concern. Then her shoulders slumped slightly. the rigid posture she'd been maintaining giving way to something more vulnerable. "I found something," she whispered, glancing toward the door to make sure no one was listening. On Tom's computer, messages to someone named Vanessa. They've been involved for months, since before we got engaged. Father David's heart sank. "Have you spoken to Tom about this?" Lily nodded, a bitter smile crossing her face. "He said it was nothing, just flirting, that it didn't mean anything and he'd ended it." She looked up, meeting Father David's eyes directly for the first time. "But he lied. I checked again last night and there were new messages from yesterday. He was telling her he'd see her next week, that he'd make up some story about a business trip." The wedding march music began to play faintly from the sanctuary. Lily's mother appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up at the sight of her daughter. "It's time, sweetheart," she said, not noticing the tension in the room. Father David looked at Lily, recognizing the silent plea in her eyes. She was trapped between desire to avoid public embarrassment and the knowledge that she was about to make a terrible mistake. In that moment, Father David made a decision that would change everything. "Mrs. Chen," he said kindly, "I need a few more minutes with Lily for a brief prayer. Would you mind telling the pianist to play another prelude?" Lily's mother looked confused but nodded and left. As soon as the door closed, Lily's carefully constructed composure began to crumble. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, tears finally welling in her eyes. "I can't marry someone who's already betraying me, but I can't face everyone out there, either." Father David placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to decide everything right now, but you do need to be honest with yourself first and then with everyone else. Some moments in life define us, Lily. This is one of those moments." Outside, the guests murmured in confusion as the music continued, but no bridal party appeared. Tom shifted uncomfortably at the altar, checking his watch. And in the small side room, a bride in white made the hardest decision of her life, not realizing that this painful moment was actually saving her from years of heartbreak to come. Tutoring. Guests shifted in their seats as the minutes ticked by. The string quartet had cycled through their repertoire twice now, and whispers began to circulate through the church. In the front row, Tom's mother checked her watch for the third time, her perfectly arranged smile beginning to falter. The wedding planner darted back and forth between the sanctuary and the bridal room, her professional calm giving way to visible concern. Tom rocked slightly on his heels at the altar, his best man leaning in to whisper something that made him frown. When Father David finally emerged from the side door, Tom's expression was a mixture of impatience and confusion. "Ladies and gentlemen," Father David announced, his voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling of the church, "I apologize for the delay. Before we proceed, I need a brief moment with the bride and groom in the vestry." A wave of murmurs rippled through the congregation. This wasn't part of the usual wedding script. Tom's smile tightened as he nodded stiffly and followed the priest toward the vestry, a small room behind the altar where clergy prepared for services. "What's going on?" Tom asked, as soon as the heavy wooden door closed behind them. "Is Lily having some kind of meltdown? We have 200 people waiting. She'll be joining us momentarily," Father David replied, his tone measured and calm. "I believe there are some matters that need to be addressed before this ceremony can proceed." Tom's jaw tightened. "What matters?" "We've done all the counseling, signed all the paperwork. Everything's set." A soft knock interrupted them and Lily entered, still in her wedding dress but with her veil pushed back from her face. Her makeup remained flawless, but there was a new resolution in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "What's this about, Lily?" Tom asked, his voice softening as he stepped toward her. "Are you just nervous? Because that's normal, but we can't keep everyone waiting much longer." Lily took a deep breath. "I know about Vanessa," she said simply. The change in Tom's face was subtle but unmistakable. A slight widening of the eyes, a twitch at the corner of his mouth, then a quick recovery as he reached for her hands. "Honey, what are you talking about?" Lily stepped back, avoiding his touch. I saw the messages, Tom, all of them. Not just the ones from months ago that you told me meant nothing, but the ones from yesterday. Making plans for next week while we're supposed to be on our honeymoon. Father David remained silent, giving them space while staying present as a witness and mediator. He'd seen many confrontations in his years, but each one carried its own weight of human pain. You went through my private messages? Tom's voice had a dangerous edge now. That's a violation of my privacy. I can't believe you would do that the night before our wedding. I shouldn't have had to, Lily replied, her voice stronger than she expected. But I'm glad I did. You've been lying to me, Tom, for months. Tom ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, his charm falling away like a mask slipping. It's not what you think. Vanessa is just a friend who gets a little flirty sometimes. I play along because it's harmless, it doesn't mean anything. You told her you loved her, Lily said quietly. You told her you were only marrying me because it was too late to back out without causing a scene. Tom's expression darkened. You're taking things out of context. Look, everyone has cold feet before their wedding. Everyone says stupid things they don't mean. This isn't cold feet, Tom. This is you actively planning to cheat on me during our honeymoon. Lily's voice caught, but she continued. How could you stand before God and our families and promise to be faithful when you never intended to keep that promise? Father David finally spoke. Tom, is what Lily's saying true? Tom's face flushed with anger. This is between me and my fiancée. With all due respect, Father, you're here to perform a ceremony, not judge our personal lives. I'm here to officiate a sacrament, Father David corrected gently. A covenant made before God and witnesses. That requires honesty from both parties. Fine, Tom snapped, his pleasant facade completely gone now. You want honesty? Yes, I've been talking to Vanessa. We have a connection, a history. But I chose to marry Lily. Isn't that what matters? I'm standing here ready to go through with this. For appearance's sake, Lily said, not because you love me or plan to honor our vows. A sharp knock on the door interrupted them. The wedding planner poked her head in, her professional smile strained. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the guests are becoming quite restless. The Chambers family has a flight to catch this evening and give us a few more minutes, Father David said firmly. When the door closed again, Tom turned to Lily, his voice lowering. Think about what you're doing. Everyone we know is out. There. Your mother has spent a fortune on this wedding. My business partners flew in from across the country. You're going to humiliate us both over some text messages? They're not just messages, Lily said. They're proof that this marriage would be built on lies. Every marriage has secrets, Tom argued, a hint of desperation entering his voice. No, one's perfect. We can work through this after the wedding. Father David watched as Lily straightened her shoulders, something resolute settling into her expression. There isn't going to be a wedding, she said. Not today. Not between us. Tom's face darkened. You can't be serious. Do you know how this will look? What people will say? I do, Lily replied. And it's still better than spending my life with someone who doesn't truly love me. You'll regret this, Tom said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he stepped closer to her. I know things about your family, about your brother's legal troubles, about your father's business before he died. Things you wouldn't want getting around town. Father David stepped forward, placing himself slightly between them. That sounds very much like a threat, Tom. It's a reality check, Tom shot back. Actions have consequences. Lily's about to embarrass me in front of everyone. I know. She shouldn't be surprised if I'm not exactly discreet about her family's dirty laundry afterward. The vestry door opened again, but this time it wasn't the wedding planner. It was Lily's cousin Pete, a detective with the local police department, who had taken a rare day off to attend the wedding. Everything okay in here? He asked, his trained eye quickly taking in the tension in the room. Your mom sent me to check on you, Lily. People are getting worried. Lily looked at Tom, then at Father David, then finally at her cousin. In that moment, with 3 sets of eyes on her, she made her choice. "No," she said simply. "Everything is not okay, and I think it's time everyone knew why." Pete's presence changed the atmosphere in the vestry immediately. His casual wedding attire couldn't hide his natural authority, or the way his eyes quickly assessed the situation. "What's going on?" he asked, his gaze moving between Lily's distress and Tom's barely contained anger. Lily hesitated, the weight of public embarrassment still heavy on her mind. 200 guests, thousands of dollars, countless expectations, all hanging in the balance of what she said next. "Tom has been unfaithful," Father David explained when Lily remained silent. "Not just emotionally, but it appears he was making plans to continue this behavior during the honeymoon." Pete's expression hardened as he looked at Tom. "Is that true?" "This is a private matter," Tom snapped, straightening his tie with a jerky motion. "A misunderstanding between me and my fiancée that's being blown out of proportion. He's also threatened to spread rumors about our family if I don't go through with the wedding," Lily added, finding her voice again. "About Dad's business troubles before he died, and about Michael's legal issues." Pete stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. "That sounds like blackmail," he said, his voice deceptively casual. "And I take that kind of thing very seriously, especially when it involves my family." "Oh, come on," Tom scoffed, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. "We're all upset. Things get said in the heat of the moment. No one's blackmailing anyone." "Let me see your phone," Pete said suddenly. "Excuse me?" Tom's hand instinctively went to his pocket. "That's ridiculous. I'm not giving you my phone." "I think you should," Father David suggested quietly. "If there's nothing to hide, it might help clear this up quickly." "I don't have to prove anything to any of you," Tom insisted, his charm completely evaporated now. "This is my wedding day, and instead of supporting me, you're all ganging up on me because Lily went snooping through my private messages." The vestry door opened again, and this time it was Tom's best man, Ryan, poking his head in. "Hey, what's the holdup? People are starting to leave." Tom seized the opportunity, pushing past Pete toward the door. "We're coming right now. Tell everyone. It was just a minor issue with the paperwork." "No," Lily said firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "We're not going ahead with this wedding, Ryan." "I'm sorry." Ryan's jaw dropped. "What? Why? What's happening?" "Your friend has been cheating on me," Lily said simply, "and was planning to continue during our honeymoon." Ryan's eyes widened as he looked at Tom. "Dude, tell me that's not true." "She's overreacting," Tom said through gritted teeth. "It was just some flirtatious text with an old friend. Nothing physical happened." "Yet," Lily added, "the only reason nothing physical has happened is that you haven't had the opportunity. But you were making plans for next week." Ryan looked genuinely shocked. "With who? Not Vanessa?" The surprise on everyone's face was evident. Ryan's question had revealed more than he intended. "You knew about her?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. I mean, I knew they dated years ago, before you. I didn't know they were still in touch." "We're not in touch," Tom said sharply. "It's nothing like I keep saying." "It didn't sound like nothing in those messages," Lily replied. "It sounded like two people in love, making plans for a future together." A heavy silence fell over the room. Outside, they could hear the murmur of confused guests growing louder. Pete cleared his throat. "I think we need to make an announcement to the guests. They deserve to know why they've been kept waiting." "No." Tom's face flushed with anger. "You can't humiliate me like that. Think about my business, my reputation." "You should have thought about that before," Pete replied calmly. Father David stepped forward. "I believe I should be the one to address the congregation. As the officiant, it's my responsibility." He turned to Lily. "What would you like me to tell them?" Lily took a deep breath. The dress that had felt so magical this morning now seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. "The truth," she said finally. "Not every detail, but enough. They should know that the wedding isn't happening. And it's not because of cold feet or a minor disagreement. You'll regret this, Tom hissed, stepping closer to her. All of you. Pete placed a firm hand on Tom's shoulder, guiding him back. I think you should take a moment to cool down. These kinds of statements could be interpreted as threats, and that would be unfortunate. While this tense exchange was happening, Ryan had slipped out of the vestry, presumably to rejoin the waiting guests. But a moment later, the door burst open again, and a striking woman in her early 30s stormed in, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Tom. Is it true? She demanded, her voice trembling with emotion. Ryan just told me Lily found our messages. The room went completely still. Tom's face drained of color as he stared at the newcomer. Vanessa, he said weakly. What are you doing here? You weren't invited. I came to support Ryan, she said, then turned to Lily with a mix of defiance and shame in her eyes. I'm his sister. That's how Tom and I met years ago before you. Lily felt as though the floor was tilting beneath her. You're Ryan's sister? And you've been seeing my fiancé behind my back? He told me you knew about us, Vanessa said, her certainty faltering, that you had an understanding, that your marriage was just for appearances, for his career. A bitter laugh escaped Lily's lips. There was no understanding. There was just Tom lying to both of us. Father David watched as the truth unfolded, in the small vestry, layer by painful layer. In his decades of priesthood, he had witnessed many human dramas, but few as nakedly revealing as this one. What had begun as a celebration of love had exposed a web of deception that had ensnared not just Lily and Tom, but everyone connected to them. I think, he said gently into the stunned silence that followed Vanessa's revelation, that it's time I spoke to our guests. They deserve to know that there will be no wedding today. As Father David moved toward the door, Tom made one last desperate attempt. Can't we talk about this privately? Work things out? People make mistakes, Lily. Lily looked at the man she had almost married, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Yes, they do, she agreed quietly. But I'm not going to make the mistake of marrying someone who doesn't truly love me. With those words, the carefully constructed future she had planned crumbled completely. But as Father David opened the door to face the waiting congregation, Lily felt something unexpected beneath her grief and humiliation, the first faint stirring of relief. The church fell silent as Father David stepped out from the vestry and approached the altar. 200 faces turned toward him, expressions ranging from confused to concerned. In the front row, Lily's mother half rose from her seat, anxiety etched across her features. Ladies and gentlemen, Father David began, his voice steady and calm, I regret to inform you that the wedding ceremony will not be taking place today. A collective gasp rippled through the church, followed by a buzz of whispered questions. Father David raised his hands gently to quiet the crowd. I know many of you have traveled far to be here, and this is unexpected news. Lily has asked me to tell you that she is deeply sorry for the inconvenience, but circumstances have come to light that make it impossible for this marriage to proceed. Tom's mother stood up, her voice sharp with distress. What circumstances? Where is my son? What's happening? Mrs. Reynolds, Father David said kindly but firmly, I understand your concern. Tom is still in the vestry. This is a private matter between the bride and groom, but I can assure you that this decision was not made lightly. More voices joined in, the confusion growing louder. In the midst of the commotion, the vestry door opened again. Pete emerged first, his hand resting lightly but meaningfully on Tom's shoulder. Vanessa followed, her face tear-streaked but resolute. Last came Lily, her wedding dress a cruel reminder of what should have been the happiest day of her life. Seeing his mother's distress, Tom shook off Pete's hand and hurried down the aisle toward her. It's all a misunderstanding, he announced loudly. Lily's gotten some crazy idea in her head and won't listen to reason. Lily's mother rushed to her daughter's side. Honey, what's going on? Are you okay? Lily took her mother's hands, painfully, aware of the spectacle they were creating. Mom, I can't marry Tom. He's been... She paused, searching for the simplest truth, dishonest about some very important things. She found messages between Tom and me, Vanessa said, stepping forward. Her voice trembled but carried through the hushed church. Messages that showed we've been seeing each other behind her back. Another wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the congregation. Ryan, standing awkwardly near the altar, looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Everyone, please," Father David called over the growing noise. "This is a difficult moment for all involved. I suggest we give the families some privacy to sort this out. If you could please exit the church in an orderly fashion." "No need," Tom interrupted loudly. His charm had returned, though it now seemed hollow and forced. "Clearly there's been a terrible mistake today. I apologize to everyone for the drama and inconvenience. Obviously, Lily is going through something right now and it's affected her judgment." Lily stepped forward, suddenly angry at his attempt to make her look unstable. "Stop it, Tom. Don't try to spin this. You've been lying to me, to everyone, for months." "Sweetheart," her mother whispered urgently, "maybe this isn't the place." "It has to be," Lily replied, her voice gaining strength. "I'm not going to let him turn this around on me." She addressed the stunned congregation directly. "I'm sorry you all came for a wedding that won't happen. But I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. I deserve better than a marriage built on lies." The church was so quiet now that the sound of a hymnal falling from a pew echoed like a thunderclap. No one seemed to know what to do or say next. It was Tom's father who broke the silence. A distinguished man with silver at his temples, he rose slowly from his seat beside his wife. "Tom," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "is what she's saying true?" All eyes turned to Tom, whose confident facade wavered under his father's gaze. "Dad, it's complicated." "It's a simple question," his father pressed. "Have you been involved with this young woman while engaged to Lily?" The silence stretched as Tom struggled to find an answer that wouldn't incriminate him. His hesitation was damning. "I see," his father said quietly. He turned to address the guests. "On behalf of our family, I apologize for this situation. Clearly, my son has some serious explaining to do. But that's a family matter. For now, I suggest we all respect Lily's decision and give both families some space." His dignified response seemed to break the spell of shock. People began to gather their things, the rustle of movement replacing the tense silence. Some approached Lily with awkward words of support, or simply squeezed her hand as they passed. Others avoided eye contact altogether, hurrying toward the exits. Lily's mother guided her toward the small bride's room, away from the curious stares. "Oh, honey," she said once they were alone. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I only found out last night," Lily explained, sinking into a chair. "And then this morning, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that I could go through with it anyway, that maybe things would get better." Her mother knelt beside her, heedless of her expensive outfit. "My brave girl," she said, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "I know how hard this must have been." "Are you mad about the money?" Lily asked in a small voice. "The deposits, the flowers, everything. Money can be replaced," her mother said firmly. "Your happiness can't be. Your father would have been so proud of you today. For canceling my wedding and creating a huge scandal. For having the courage to stand up for yourself even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to stay quiet." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Father David entered, his kind face solemn. "Most of the guests have left," he reported. "Pete is making sure Tom leaves the premises without further incident." "And Vanessa?" Lily asked, surprised at her own curiosity about the other woman. "She's with Ryan. She wants to speak with you when you're ready. Not today, perhaps, but soon." Lily nodded, too emotionally drained to decide now. "What happens next?" her mother asked practically. "Do we need to do anything official to cancel the marriage license?" "Since no ceremony took place, there's nothing to annul or cancel legally," Father David explained. "But I'd be happy to help, with notifying vendors or whatever else you might need." "Thank you," Lily said, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of his offer. For everything. If you hadn't noticed something was wrong this morning. I've been doing this job for many years, he replied gently. You'd be surprised how often I see that look, someone going through the motions while their heart is screaming for them to stop. He patted her hand. It takes courage to listen to that voice. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across the empty church, Lily found herself sitting alone in a pew, still in her wedding dress. The flowers that had seemed so perfect that morning now drooped slightly in the warm air. The carefully arranged programs had been collected and boxed away. The caterers at the reception venue had been called and told the news. It was, by any conventional standard, a disaster. And yet, as Lily sat in the quiet sanctuary, watching dust motes dance in the colored light from the stained glass windows, she felt the first fragile tendrils of peace beginning to grow within her. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, explanations, to distant relatives returning gifts, facing the inevitable gossip. But today, she had chosen truth over appearance, self-respect over convenience. And for now, that was enough. The seasons changed, summer fading into fall, then winter, and finally, blooming into spring again. Almost a year had passed since the day that should have been Lily's wedding day. The bell above the door of Turning Page Books jingled as Father David entered, stomping a bit of rain from his shoes on the welcome mat. The bookstore smelled of paper, coffee, and the faint sweetness of the fresh flowers Lily placed by the register every Monday morning. Father David. Lily looked up from behind the counter where she was arranging a display of local authors. Her smile was genuine, reaching all the way to her eyes in a way it hadn't for months after the wedding that wasn't. I wasn't expecting to see you today. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by to see how the new owner is doing, he replied, glancing around the cozy shop with approval. The place looks wonderful. Lily's cheeks flushed with pride as she came around the counter. Thanks. We just finished the children's corner last week. She led him to a cheerful nook with small chairs, colorful rugs, and bookshelves sized for little hands. It's perfect, Father David said. I'm going to recommend this to the families in the parish. Please do. Our Saturday morning story time starts next week. They moved to the small cafe area at the back of the store where a few customers sat, reading or working on laptops. Lily poured coffee for both of them and they settled at a corner table. So, Father David said after taking a sip, it's been almost a year. 342 days, Lily replied with a small smile. Not that I'm counting. How are you? Really? Lily took a moment to consider the question. I'm good. Better than good, actually. There are still moments when I remember how humiliated I felt that day, but they're getting fewer and farther between. The shop seems to be thriving. It is. Turns out I'm pretty good at running a business. She glanced around at her domain with quiet satisfaction. Dad always said I had good instincts. I wish he could see this. I think he can, Father David said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the rain tap against the windows. The bookstore had been Lily's dream for years, but she'd put it aside when she met Tom, focusing instead on their relationship and wedding plans. After the wedding fell apart, she'd used part of her savings, money that would have gone toward the honeymoon, as a down payment on the struggling local bookshop that was about to close. Have you heard from Tom? Father David finally asked. Not directly. I heard from Pete that he moved to Chicago a few months ago. Apparently his company transferred him after the, incident affected his client relationships here. And Vanessa? Lily stirred her coffee thoughtfully. We actually met for coffee last summer. It was awkward at first, but it turned out to be healing, I guess. She really didn't know about me, or rather, she thought I knew about her. Tom had created this whole story about our engagement being just for show. That must have been a difficult conversation. It was, but necessary. We were both victims of the same lie. She's back in school now, finishing her degree. We're not friends exactly, but we're not enemies either. A young woman carrying a stack of books approached their table, hovering hesitantly. "Excuse me, Miss Chen? I was wondering if you could recommend something similar to the series I just finished?" "Of course." Lily stood up immediately in her element. "Let me see what you've got there." Father David watched as she led the customer through the shelves, pulling out books and describing each one with enthusiasm. Her knowledge was impressive, but it was her genuine connection with the customer that truly stood out. She was a natural at this, building relationships, creating a welcoming space, sharing her passion for stories. When Lily returned a few minutes later, Father David was smiling. "What?" she asked, sitting back down. "I was just thinking about how things work out, sometimes. Not always in the way we expect, but often in the way we need." Lily nodded slowly. "I used to be so angry about what happened. I felt like everything I'd planned had been stolen from me, but now I can see that day saved me from years of heartbreak and lies." She gestured around the bookstore, "And it gave me this. I'm not sure I would have had the courage to do this if I'd gotten married." "Courage has never been something you lacked," Father David observed. "Not from what I've seen." The bell above the door jingled again, and Lily glanced over to see her mother entering with an older gentleman. They were laughing about something, their comfortable body language suggesting this wasn't their first time together. "Mom, I didn't know you were stopping by today." Lily stood to greet them, giving her mother a hug. "We were just having lunch down the street and thought we'd pop in," her mother explained. "David, you remember Professor Wu from the university? He's been helping us organize the poetry reading series." "Of course," Father David shook the man's hand. "Your lecture on contemporary Asian literature last fall was fascinating." Professor Wu smiled warmly. "Thank you for saying so. I'm hoping to bring some of my students to Lily's shop for the next local authors event." "That would be wonderful," Lily said. "We could do a special display of their work." As they chatted, Father David noticed the subtle glances between Lily's mother and the professor. There was an ease and warmth there that spoke of new beginnings. Lily had mentioned that her mother had started getting out more in recent months, but he hadn't realized things had progressed to lunches and shared projects. Life moved forward, he thought, sometimes in unexpected directions. After Lily's mother and the professor moved to browse the new arrival section, Lily caught Father David's questioning look. "They've been spending a lot of time together," she said quietly. "It's nice to see Mom happy again. After Dad died, I wasn't sure she ever would be. And how do you feel about it?" "Good, really good. Dad would have approved of her finding companionship again. And Professor Wu is kind and thoughtful, nothing like Tom." At the mention of her ex-fiancé's name, a shadow briefly crossed her face. "You know," she said. "The strangest part of all this is that I'm actually grateful now. Not for the lies or the hurt, but for what happened that day in the church. For you noticing something was wrong. For Pete being there. For having the chance to choose a different path." Father David nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the hardest moments in our lives become turning points that lead us to where we're meant to be." The afternoon light filtered through the rain-streaked windows, casting a golden glow over the bookshelves. In the children's corner, a mother was reading softly to her toddler. Near the poetry section, two teenagers were laughing over a book they were sharing. By the register, Lily's assistant was carefully wrapping a purchase in brown paper and twine. It was, Father David thought, a place of genuine connection and joy, much like the woman who had created it. As he prepared to leave, Lily handed him a book. "I thought you might enjoy this. It's by a local author, essays about finding purpose after disappointment." "Thank you," he said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "You know, I've performed hundreds of weddings over the years, but I've rarely had the privilege of witnessing such growth after a wedding that didn't happen." Lily walked him to the door. Outside, the rain had stopped and hints of sunshine were breaking through the clouds. "Will you be at the church fundraiser next weekend?" Father David asked. "Wouldn't miss it," Lily replied. "I'm bringing the book table, remember? And Mom signed up for 3 kinds of cookies. Looking forward to it." As Father David walked back toward the church, he reflected on the mystery of human resilience. Sometimes the very things we think will break us become the foundations on which we build stronger, more authentic lives. In the case of the wedding that never was, what had initially seemed like a disaster had ultimately been a blessing in disguise. The bride who almost made a terrible mistake had found her true path, not despite the pain, but because of the courage it had awakened in her. And that, he thought, was the most important story of all.